Welcome to One Word Stories, episode 32. My name is Joanna Zell, and I'm really happy to host a very special guest of mine. Today's guest is Nick Dang. Nick Dang has gathered his experience in 5 different countries, is fluent in 6 different languages, understands many more. He is the career coach, but what is really very special about him is that he offers career coaching for introverts. And just this year, he released a book, which is a real treasure, regarding exactly this group: Trip, Fall, Get Back Up. All the insights for the introverts, how they can actually manage better their professional lives, but also thrive in their private lives. Nick, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yes, thank you for saying yes to One Word Stories.
Sure.
I just have one really fantastic quote from your book, which says, sometimes it only takes one word to change and impact your life permanently. Whether it's when talking to someone or reading a book, one single word could turn on this light little bulb on top of your head and trigger an idea to turn your life completely upside down. Nick, what was such a word for you?
The word for me, and actually is the last chapter of the book, it's limitless.
Tell us more.
Limitless. Well, just to make it brief, I think my life, I've been trying to follow this concept of limitless. I've lived, as you say, in 5 different countries, and I think for the people who've been living in different places, relocating frequently, they know that starting from scratch each and every time is really something that you go with your gut, you go with preparation, but there's a lot of unforeseen events, circumstances, and you just got to navigate and create your own story. And every time I think I never really question how I would make it, but just like why I did it in the first place. And this is when it happened. It just happened that there's so many opportunities that you cannot limit yourself ever.
Yeah. Actually, you have lived in France, where you grew up, in the United States, in Italy, in Vietnam, and currently you are based in Taiwan. Do
Mhm.
you encounter any contradictory stories that you need to merge in your personal
Con
one?
Contradicting stories like,
Yeah, like it's from different cultural settings and yeah, from different experiences
I
gathered in these
guess,
countries.
yeah, it's interesting that sometimes we have a tendency to feel, okay, I come from a Western country and then I'm going to Asia and then I live in Vietnam, so I might assume that Taiwan and might have a lot of similarities, which can be true. But I have to say that each experience, each adventure, you really have to press the reset button. It's just like nothing is going to be exactly the same, and most of the time it's going to be very far away from what you had in mind before you started. I think that's the thing that I've learned the most each time I relocated, because you can listen to people tell you this is how it is, this is what you're going to encounter. But again, your own experience is going to create a different path for yourself. And each time you, day by day, you learn a lot. The roller coaster of emotions is in full power. One day you are on top of the world, and the next you are just like depressed, like so sad, so upset. And if you look at it from a bigger angle, you know that this is the way it is. And this is what somehow makes it exciting. So yeah, I guess every day you encounter something new, and it depends also if you're tired, if you're happy at that moment. The experience might hit you in a very different way, because suddenly your mind is either opening or kind of restricting yourself. So you feel that something that could be seen as a detail, taken at the wrong moment, just becomes a huge big deal. And you feel like, okay, that's one more anecdote, one more story that I usually journal. I've been writing a lot for myself for a while, because I guess that it's always great to go back in time and see where you come from. And so that's why I have countless anecdotes of just customer service, for example, of expectations of, you go to a restaurant and you order something, the waiter say okay, and then comes back 30 minutes later and say, by the way, we don't have any chicken today. And you wonder, wow, but I'm sorry, but why didn't you tell me that like 30 minutes ago? And this is the things like, the expression of opinions, of being direct versus indirect, is something that we take for granted wherever we come from. But then wherever you are in a new environment, new culture, it's just something that you have to learn and adapt to.
Yes, definitely, yes. When I think of relocations, and especially also in this context of expatriations, many people who are in the leading positions and just move every 4 or 5 years, and I had the chance to meet in person, are very
Okay.
extrovert. Yeah. So this is also this asset that they get to know other people pretty quickly, that they are able to laugh a lot about cultural misunderstandings, so maybe I'm just confirming different stereotypes, how they want to be seen. However, your focus is on leaders who actually behave just the opposite. What do you actually understand under this dominant narrative of being introvert?
Wow, this is a huge topic, very interesting. So let's try to condense this content. Okay, so for me, I guess starting from scratch each and every time, it really uses my strengths as an introvert, which means a lot of preparation, a lot of reflection, a lot of like soul searching as well, because you want to know why you're doing something specifically. And so you really chew on it before you actually act. So once I get on the plane, land, and I get to my new destination, then well, there's a way to create your life. And those things that you have to do, you don't have a choice. If you stay at home all the time, I mean, pre-pandemic, because I relocated before 2019, you have to go out, you have to go get groceries, you have to find an apartment. Sometimes it's easier than in some places than others, and it just like you have to put yourself out there, otherwise you cannot create anything. So in my case, it's because I always relocated by myself. I was never under any type of contracts with the company, so maybe I didn't have that support, which would have felt extremely comfortable, extremely smooth, I think. Of course, the next step will be the cultural adaptation, but at least for the technical and logistical part, I never had this opportunity. However, I feel that I prefer it to be that way, because it really forced me to know myself much, much better. And in the book, I really talk about relocating as a way to really understand who you are, because it's always difficult to relocate, even within your own country, your own culture. But try it like somewhere completely different, and you have no choice. You have to take every ounce of energy coming out of you. Being an introvert, though, you will get and use this energy very quickly. So I didn't necessarily know that at the time. I just learned it the hard way. So when I would meet a few people and I would feel exhausted, I would not know why. Automatically, I would just resort to coming back to the hotel or the apartment and try to do more planning and more thinking. Now I know my personality type, and so I know how much I can give a limited amount of time. And relocating would be as a similar situation as in my home country. I could be very interested in some people, like very entertain and be entertaining at the same time, but there's a limit to it, and then that's when I need to recharge. So what you're talking about leaders who feel like they are very confident and they can really network very quickly, I think you're right. Maybe a lot of leaders are extroverted, and this is exactly why I do the job that I do, because the leaders are not always extroverted, but the ones who are have it much easier to promote themselves, and they are much more comfortable establishing contact with people and really creating synergy between teammates. And this is what I do this job, because a lot of leaders that I've worked with have this feeling of illegitimacy sometimes, and that's what we work on, to make sure that their expertise is not overshadowed by their a bit awkward social and communication skills.
So when I think of, your description of being an introvert, I picture immediately someone who is jumping into cold water all the time and is kind of trying to prove themselves, oh, I can make it, I can create my life in this very, very conscious way. How do you actually create this kind of narrative for yourself? Because it's not only about, the narrative of multicultural person. Yeah, you come originally from a mixed couple, French and Vietnamese, but also this narrative of really moving around. How do you actually create it for yourself that it makes sense to you and your surroundings?
Okay, I think I've been asked this before. That's a great question. It all started I think as a kid. I was lucky enough to be able to travel and visit family in the US. And I think from a very young age, it just impacted me a lot. Just seeing that my cousins were living a complete different life from me in a very, very different country. And I felt, well, they have maybe different opportunities, different environments. So how come we are separated by such distance? And maybe at that age, I realized, well, if I can visit them frequently like this, I think that's something I can do more often in the future. Another side of it would be that I think I don't, yeah, I get bored maybe of routine and events. And, I need to see that I can create and I can feel fulfilled in different types of environment, just not just one. And that's why my job allows me to do that. Because when you talk about career coaching, obviously I don't know every job in the world, but I get access to understand what the people I work with live on a daily basis, what studies they did to get there, what kind of challenges in such and such industry in their positions. And I think that's why I like about it. It's more about learning more, about acquiring more knowledge that I can apply to my own life. And it's not only to prove myself that I can do it, but it's just like part of, like tasting different foods will be one. It just like feels natural. Like, okay, maybe you like sweet more than savory. Maybe one day you go for dessert and the next day you go for steak or something like this. And so for me, working with different backgrounds and people living in different places is part of this story. I cannot consider being in one place really, even though this current situation has kind of put a hit in my mindset and my lifestyle, because it's not as free and as easy to travel and relocate right now. But I guess it's just part of the process. It helps me reflect on different things and think about what my next step could be in a few months or few years.
Yeah. So when I stick again to your word, that is it right that also the limitness kind of helped you to go through this pretty challenging times?
Yeah, and somehow I was very lucky enough again to be here, and that we barely face any restrictions and no limitations, but
You
still
mean in Taiwan?
in Taiwan, correct. But I could see, of course, family and friends and people all over the world are facing deeper issues. I just took it as a way to, okay, try to slow down a bit and try to understand what comes first. And somehow it gave me the opportunity to say, okay, for once you're going to be in one place, and try to pause a bit in the always planning what's next. So I have to say, for me, it's been a time to put on standby, but at the same time, deepening what I'm doing and try to strengthening what I'm doing too. So I guess it's Limitless in this case was more not in destinations and opportunities, but more limitless about finding my capabilities and really strengthening who I am already and what I can do more in the future.
Yeah. What I hear is that you work with storytelling and story listening practices really a lot, just also for yourself, so to say. How do you work with storytelling practices in the coaching context? How do you invite stories?
But the thing in coaching is people don't really know how to tell their stories. And actually, this is something about introverts. We are not so good at promoting ourselves originally, just because we don't like the attention. We don't like to be in the spotlight. And even though it's legitimate, even though it's just staying humble, but sharing with the world, we might see it as bragging. We might see it as being invasive or over talking, which is usually what introverts perceive as extroverted behavior or people that are overdoing things. And the goal in this coaching is to help people talk about what they did from A to Z without feeling ashamed, self-conscious, or just like not humble about it. So again, when you reach a certain level in a company, in your career, but you still feel limitations, it's because I believe you're not able to feel that your story is worth being listened to. And when I work with my clients, this is what we work on, because they feel illegitimate to be at a certain level. And even though they are qualified technically, they feel like on a human, social scale, they don't feel as fulfilled as other people. When they can tell their story with full power, pride, and really, really being authentic about their experiences, about their journey, this is when they feel like, okay, now I reconcile my technical expertise with who I am and what I truly deserve in my job and career.
Yeah. So it sounds like story empowerment.
Absolutely. And like sometimes you always need somebody on the outside to help you talk, right? And so introverts, we are very good at one-on-one conversations because we feel like we can go really deep, deep, deep. And that's why I love the one-on-one coaching, because my clients feel much more free to talk, and therefore they get to dig deeper and finally realize, well, then I just told about myself without even realizing it. And once they own their authenticity and they own the full story, it's much easier to say, okay, I did it once, I can do it twice, and then I can practice with one person and gradually with two, three, four, one-to-one or in a group.
Yeah, yeah. So you have just mentioned the word authenticity. This is also something that it plays a very, very important role in working with stories. How do you make sure that people find their core story, so to say, the core stories they want to share, despite this critical voice in their brain? Oh, it's not something you should tell, or it's not something people want to listen.
That's a good point. The authenticity for me is probably the most important, just because these days we are all on social media and we see a lot of things, and a lot of things are not quite authentic. A lot of things are on the surface, and for introverts, the surface doesn't really count and it feels very superficial. So this is why we really dig deep to understand what you say is really what you believe in, really something that you trust yourself saying each and every time. And by practicing the story, telling the story of your life, of your career, you know when someone is not comfortable, either because they don't want to share it or just because they don't feel they're authentic. And these days the game is like, we all feel that maybe extroverted leaders have more opportunities in the business world, and those introvert leaders believe that truly. And so when it comes time to tell their story, they might have a tendency to become somehow an extrovert. And a lot of people I communicate with or work with, they always say, sometimes I really try my best to become an extrovert because that's what's required of me at work, on social media. Understand, but there's a way to not lose yourself on the way to get there. So you can, of course, you can always improve skills. That's why I work in training and coaching, because I truly believe that. But what's your limit? to which you look at yourself and say, actually, this is not really me. Let me take a step back and try to rework on it. Because if you want to be seemingly extrovert, you're going to burn yourself out very, very quickly. And so, as you rightly ask, how do we make sure we stay authentic to our story? Well, you can present your story in a very, very interesting way, very meaningful way, but it doesn't need to be exuberant. It doesn't need to be the most entertaining story that you can find or can do. It can be very quiet, very slow, but very deep. And people actually will be drawn to what you said just because you are so authentic about it, and you don't need to become someone else.
Yes, yes, definitely. Definitely, yes. And actually, when I was reading your book, I also tried out different practices and exercises you recommend over there. Because you also say that, it's just your book is a reminder that we can change our behavior, we can change some habits in order to change our behavior, that it's just about time and energy we invest in our self-development. What is such a activity or maybe an exercise that you say, oh, wow, this is something that has been applied with my coaching clients, or maybe also in your case, and has really gone over your expectations?
What I like to do with my clients is, first of all, they say, I can never speak in public. It's impossible. I'm not an entertainer. I don't know. I feel the pressure. I feel like I'm sweating. And definitely, it's not only for introverts. I mean, a lot of people, you talk about public speaking and they just freak out already, just because it feels like I don't cannot hold a microphone. I cannot be in front of people. I don't know. People don't care about what I have to say. But then eventually, again, by just the one-on-one deep, meaningful conversation, what we do is I really try to get people to give their opinion frankly, and quite directly. That's usually how I behave with myself and in my life in general. And I want to do that because a lot of people try to be diplomatic and try to get two sides, which is good when you, in a lot of situations, you cannot be that direct. But then if you only go with this principle, you lose yourself. Again, where's the authenticity in what you believe and what you say? Because if you always try to please everybody, you don't even know what you believe in anymore, because you give a bit of here, you get a bit of there, and then you don't realize really what you truly believe in. And what I do usually with my clients is to work on topics that can be a bit divisive, not necessarily in a bad way, but you really have to give your opinion and kind of convince people that's what you believe in. And many times they cannot do it because they try to give a bit here, a bit there, and they say, well, maybe both would work. And the point is, no, I really need to know what you think. I don't even care if it's true or not. Just pick one side. And that's really the picking one side that can be difficult for a lot of people. And by doing this as a habit, usually we kind of practice a few times, or we try to see how we grow with these different ways of communicating. At the end, they feel like, wow, you know what? I never thought I could give my opinion without feeling embarrassed, or without feeling maybe ashamed, or just like not confident about it. They just do it a bit more naturally, just because they practice in their daily life, like talking to their spouse, their children, maybe their colleagues, saying, would you like to eat there? Actually, I'm not really feeling this kind of food, so could we go there instead? And this is something they would have never done before. So it's really small details of life that you can tweak, and then by doing it consistently, of course, it just becomes a habit. And any habit comes from the repetition, and really, really small steps at a time. There's no need to do like huge leaps, because it just frustrates people. It just makes you feel like it's impossible to reach. And this is the kind of things that, one example of things that we could do to help you feel a bit more legitimate and accomplished in your opinions.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sounds easy.
Yeah, not at all, but step by step. Yeah.
However, what I can imagine is that people, so to say, in Asian countries might even more struggle with such a practice, or it's
Absolutely.
just, yeah. Because
Actually, it is true, but somehow I've realized maybe also because of the current situation, people, they kind of shut it down a bit, and then it becomes difficult. For example, if you were gonna ask your boss maybe next month, or do we really need to go back to the office? I would prefer stay home now. We've done it for a year. Just doing this for most people would be hard because they wouldn't know how to explain clearly their side of the story, giving for them strong arguments that would make them feel, okay, my request is legitimate. So I think these days it's a bit, pretty much everyone around the globe, but you're right. Usually in Asia, because of the culture, it's not really deep rooted that when you were a child, you start talking back to your parents or you give a stronger opinion growing up. But usually people I work with might be involved with foreign companies, managers and so on. And in this case, they really face the struggle of, I don't know, I don't dare saying it directly because I'm not used to it. So, and I'm sure you've encountered that a lot also in your intercultural work throughout the years. It's something that it takes time, but
yes.
you got to find like where people feel comfortable and again authentic. If they feel like this is legitimate, this is reasonable, they feel a bit more open and comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, and this is also, something that comes to my head when I think of your world of influences, because with this mindset coming from the Vietnamese origin, and with the mindset in France, which is actually just the opposite. Yeah, when I think of French education, it's really about using
Yeah.
very strong rational arguments and really saying this is like that, and and I'm right. Yeah, and this just one path is really the proper one. How is it possible to reconcile these two different voices?
It's a very, very interesting question. And maybe that's the reason why I feel this need to go explore and start from scratch. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's exactly the case, but maybe growing up, you're right. I could have seen those two sides, and you get to wonder if you're in the middle. Is one right and the other wrong? Is one better than the other? Who knows? And by not accepting those things for what they are, maybe by expanding my horizon and a circle, I could see and discover new things that would confirm or just maybe, favor one to the next. But it was really about, it's always about discovering, about experimenting and just drawing my own conclusions. I've never been a proponent of drinking words from somebody else. And that's why growing up in the French school system was not very easy, because I felt it was, you're right, there's a lot of debating going on, but at the end of the day, I felt it was forced on me rather than helping me develop critical thinking. So I guess it started from there, moving to the States, moving to Asia, and discovering, okay, some people do it this way, some people that way. What do I like? And I try to take the ones that fit me the most and try to, and play and experiment with it. So yeah, being in the middle can be, a good mix. And sometimes you get to wonder even more because you see two things every day. You really wonder which one should I use when. Really, that's the question.
Yeah, yeah. Would you have such an example actually? It's a short story.
Let me see. Hmm. Well, I guess growing up, I think it was really about family values. Like usually Vietnamese families are larger than French families, or at least back in the day. And it was like, what is the extent to which you include the whole family rather
Yes.
than just the two parents and the kids?
Yeah.
And for sure, that can create some misunderstandings, some arguments into, okay, but that's normal there. Of course, we always invite grandparents and cousins. We share the meal. We travel all together and so on, rather than, no, actually, I don't see it this way. This is like only the 4 or 5 of us. And then maybe we extend the invitation. So these stories really for any family gatherings or reunions, that was a huge difference. My Vietnamese family in the States and French family in France, you could see that if you're not aware of the differences, it can become extremely frustrating for any party. One feeling overwhelmed by the amount of people, and the other one feeling like, but why are you so selfish? Because we
Mhm.
just one family. There's no such thing as uh, group A and then circle B and circle C, right? It's just like one one fruit, I would say. So it was
Mm,
maybe those examples that kind of asked me to wonder, okay, so yeah, in this case, I don't know which is the right answer. And I was thinking they're both right, but they, maybe somebody looks frustrated and the other not so happy. So how do we reconcile that? Of course,
mm,
now you grow up, you think, okay, it's about adapting yourself, but exactly how much do you give and how much you take?
yeah.
It depends on everybody, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah, sure. It's in all the multicultural families to different extents, of course, but definitely, yes, it's about, yes, compromising in daily life. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, what is actually very, very striking about your description is also this tendency not to take the narratives for granted. Yeah. That's just saying, okay, I see the source of such behavior and I see the consequences, and I can be the author, so to say, of my own decisions and my own, yes, just cultural consequences for my surroundings. So this is also one more great example of the story empowerment. The more conscious we are about it, these narratives that were given us, so to say, to the
Mm,
cradle,
yeah.
the easier it is to reconcile different narratives afterwards. Yeah. So thank
Yeah, I
you, thank
agree.
you.
Absolutely. And for me, growing up in France and moving to the States, just the way you probably that's why I'm into career coaching, because I felt the limitations that you have in one country versus the next. And I felt like it was completely different. The amount of possibilities, and again, being limitless, more in the States than in France. I felt that in France, really, you have this threshold you cannot really pierce through. And I felt, why? What is that? And for me, questioning it means experimenting on the other side to see, okay, that's the flip of this coin. I want to try and see if it works and it is in line with my values. So you're right. It's not accepting anything until you experiment, you draw your conclusion, and then you pick a side.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I wish you that your stories unfold in the most beautiful way.
Thank you,
It
Joanna.
doesn't matter where you land next. I'm really curious, by the way.
Well, for now, to be honest, it's hard to kind of plan anything, and honestly, it's also good to take the time to reflect, try to,
Yeah.
building strong foundation also for the next step. But for sure, this is not an ideal time, and I'm not trying to force anything. It's just that you can learn a lot about yourself also by being where you are. I'm not saying
Yes.
that you should. I say it in the book too. I'm not claiming that everybody should be like running around the world to find themselves. It
Mm,
just shows you at least one different side of what you're capable of. But for sure, these days, let's stay put, let's stay still, and see how the situation evolves.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nick, very, very much.
Thank you so much, Joanna. It was a very great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I loved it. Take care.